Welcome everybody again for the next webinar from EDI. Today we're going to discuss LNG. So is LNG a winner or a victim of the Corona crisis? So I'm joined here today with Peter Hendrickx, an LNG consultant, also involved in some of our courses as well. And he's a long time, almost veteran, I would say, from the industry. Yes. So I'm sure that he can shed some light on this issue and see what are the applications of LNG at the moment and how does it look like in the future as well. Just before we start, Peter, I would like to say to the audience that, again, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat box, then I'll see them here on the screen. And we'll try to answer them as much as possible. And for the rest, I would say enjoy. Peter, can I give the floor to you? And we're going to start.
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
Well, it's a pleasure for me to be here. I had to travel a little bit, but in Corona times, the advantage
you're
is...
here in person, actually.
Yeah, in Corona times, not very much traffic jam, so your traveling time can be planned very well. Yes, what I would like to discuss with you is the question, what about LNG? Will it be a winner or a victim in this Corona crisis? And not that there is a link between LNG and Corona, but Corona is disrupting a lot of processes. And just to inform you, for instance, I was this week and also last week in the south of Germany, where one of the companies I'm working for is building a big LNG filling station, and we see the market expanding there. And during this Corona crisis, we saw that the number of trucks refueling just continued. There was no more or less on the same level.
Okay.
And we have the same experience here in the Netherlands, that the filling stations which are in operation here, there was a slight decrease in turnover, but not as strong as we have seen on diesel and petrol stations. It has a very logical explanation because the majority of the transport companies, especially in the Netherlands, using LNG trucks, are active in the supermarket logistics, and we have seen that during this crisis, the supermarket turnover really increased because all the restaurants was closed. So it has a logic explanation, but it was good for us. So our cash flow remains on level, and it strengthened us in our belief that we further have to continue to expand the LNG network in other countries in Europe.
Okay. Good news, I would say. Maybe not so good news if you're supplying LNG, but we'll probably come to that.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Well, the topics I want to discuss and to highlight today is what you can see here on the screen is something about the LNG trucks, the availability and the refueling infrastructure, how it's developing at this moment. The urgency which still remains with Corona or without Corona to meet the Paris CO2 reduction targets, and what kind of actions can be taken today, now. And I think a very important question and a challenging one, and that's what we are looking at. Will this crisis accelerate the transition from diesel to LNG, or will we jump in one big jump from diesel to hydrogen?
Yeah.
And I think I have an answer on it, but I'm curious to see and to hear if there are other views or other ideas about that.
Yeah, I think yesterday the Commission presented their green recovery plan. So there's a big chunk of it about hydrogen, but there's also on transport in greening in general.
Exactly. Yeah. And then, well, I can show you some figures about one of the brands which are being developed at this moment to be ready for the market in the next 2 years. There's the Nikola 3 hydrogen fuel cell electric truck. And perhaps if you see the data and the characteristics from that showcase, then you will see the answer on my question, will we switch from diesel to LNG or from diesel to hydrogen?
Okay.
And then, of course, topics for discussion.
Yes.
I started about 10 years ago to convert a first truck here in the Netherlands from CNG to LNG, and that was the first step to develop also filling stations, and that's how it started. But it was only one brand with one truck with a limited horsepower, a manual gearbox, so it was really hard work for the drivers to drive an LNG truck. Mm-hmm. If you look today, we have meanwhile 3 brands, Iveco, Scania, Volvo, offering next to their diesel models more or less LNG equivalents with the same performance, with the same specifications, with a range varying between 800 and 1600 kilometers, making it possible to do all the transport jobs, logistic jobs, which you are doing with a diesel truck, with an LNG truck.
Is it the same range? I don't know about trucks, but is it the same?
Depends on the fuel tank size. With a 600-liter fuel tank size, the range is a little bit larger, but not very much.
Okay. Yeah.
But with this range, and then of course, the assumption is that there will be sufficient LNG fueling stations in Europe. You can do a job for international long haulage as good as on a diesel. Mm-hmm. And this, as I said, this happened only in 5-6 years. Yeah. We started with one brand as being the first, and we see now 3 brands offering a full range with LNG. And perhaps more will follow. Yeah. It depends how the market develops, and also how governments will treat incentives for this kind of fuel transitions. Mm-hmm. Well, just a brief run. If you look at this Stralis, the same 460 horsepower as the diesels, but 10 to 15% carbon dioxide reduction and up to 95% CO2 reduction if we are running on biomethane. Mm-hmm. And it just happens that one of the companies active in the Netherlands yesterday announced that they have now signed contracts with 2 major customers here in the Netherlands, offering bio LNG in the trucks which are in operation for their activities, yeah, which are now showing this kind of CO2 reduction potentials, mm-hmm, which I think with other fuels you can only dream of.
Yeah, this is great. Yeah, and in Nordic countries it's also coming up a lot. In Sweden it's one of the main things, correct, but not for LNG, but for CNG.
Yeah.
But biomethane.
So this is the first step, and it shows that starting with LNG and then slowly or faster, depends on the availability of bio LNG, you have the same infrastructure, the same trucks, being capable to offer tremendous carbon dioxide reductions in an economical way. So you don't need heavy subsidies or whatever on it. It's just...
Is the price of the truck similar, or is it much more expensive?
You mean compared to diesel? Or
compared to the normal model on diesel.
Yes, the trucks are still about 15-20% more expensive. Okay. But it's rapidly due to scale effects, and you can see now that the price difference is rapidly decreasing. And if you look at the technology, if you compare a diesel engine with a gas engine, then in fact, if you look at just at the metal standing there, it shouldn't be more expensive. Yeah. The only expensive part on such a truck, really more expensive, are the cryogenic tanks to hold the fuel. That's in fact. But even there, we see also the prices going down with the numbers going up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good news.
Well, the other brand is Scania, offering more or less the same performance power range as Iveco, with the same engine technology. Iveco, Scania are using the spark ignited gas engines, mm-hmm, while the third one, Volvo, this one is offering a different technology. It's called HPDI, which is in fact a diesel principle using natural gas as fuel. Okay. And they use a very small quantity of diesel as a pilot injection to start the combustion in the engine. Okay. So it's a different approach. Yeah. both systems have advantages and disadvantages, of course, as always in technology. And so the advantage from Volvo is that you have the same performance and torque and as the customers are used from their diesel trucks. Disadvantage is that the technical investment in this engine is substantial higher than a spark ignited engine, and you have to do more on emission control to make sure that the emission levels are really kept at least at the same level as Euro 6 diesel.
And you still have to tank a little diesel,
exactly,
small time problem,
and add blue also. So that makes it's a more complicated process. At the other hand, performance and fuel consumption of the trucks are showing very good figures. So for the end user, it's a very attractive technology to drive with. And the other two are offering, they have other advantages that it's simpler, you don't have AdBlue, you don't have soot filters, the engines are quieter, so lower noise levels, so for city distribution and that kind of things, it has advantages. So as I said, but the efficiency is slightly lower, but if we look at the developments ongoing, also on spark-ignited engines, then we see that the efficiency of that concept of engines are coming very close to the diesel and HPDI engines, so they're really competitive, but it's a different way.
Of course.
Then, as I said, when we started 8-9 years ago, there were 3 or 4 LNG filling stations in Spain. There were a few in the UK, but that was quite outdated technology. And we started with the first mobile station in the Netherlands, very close to the first supermarket distribution center, and that's how we started. That's now 10 years ago. Today we have in Europe, if you look at this picture, about 280 LNG stations and quite a number, 3,800 CNG stations. So the network has expanded enormously, and with the most important markers in network is Spain, Italy. Italy came from nothing to 55 stations in a very short time.
CNG is also very important in Italy, also for the consumer market.
The Netherlands, so Benelux, is catching up considerably. The Scandinavian territory is taking off. The big white spot in Europe was Germany, and it's a little bit surprising because the majority of the technology we are talking about, if you're talking about filling stations, engine technology, it's all coming from German companies, but in their own country, they
didn't believe in it.
They didn't believe in it, and they were a little bit reluctant, and they first wanted to do more research, and so it didn't move really, and also they saw it as all foreign brands. So no German brands. So, and I was once in Berlin and in a presentation, and one of the attendees on that presentation said, "Wenn Daimler es nicht macht, glauben wir es nicht." So that was a little bit the attitude in Germany. But since the German government really has put some incentive programs in place for natural gas, irrespective if it's CNG or LNG, and especially they issued now a rule to free the heavy trucks from the famous maut, so road tax on the German motorways. Now suddenly there is a tremendous change in the market. So a lot of transport operators see the advantages. They see immediate cost saving opportunities. So they now are desperately looking for these trucks, and the only question they ask is, where are the filling stations? Where can I refuel my truck? And I only take the truck if we can refuel them. So there is now a tremendous pressure in Germany to build a fuel station network. And there are now a few parties like Shell, like Rolande, like Uniper, which are now heavily investing in expanding the LNG refueling network in Germany, which will create a big boost in LNG as fuel in European logistics.
Is it also one of the questions we had is the LNG infrastructure that you're envisioning now, building up basically? You can fuel that. You can fuel the stations, of course, with a pipeline, for example, or a truck or whatever. But is it also possible to do it by river, by canals?
Well, this is
something that you.
Yeah, that's a very logical question, because why was one of the early startups in Spain? Because Spain has no national gas grid. Okay. They only had local grids, and they had LNG storage facilities to fill these local grids. And from these storage facilities, it was a small step to build a filling station and to start refueling trucks. The Netherlands, we have, and also Belgium, we have big LNG landing facilities on the harbor in Rotterdam and in Zeebrugge. So for the Netherlands, the logistics of LNG was relative easy. Just you could collect it every day from the harbor and fill the stations, and that's how we still work in the Netherlands. Into Germany, then transport distances are getting bigger and bigger, and that means that the logistic costs are also getting higher. And another thing which we should not want in Europe is that with this new fuel, that the number of transport movements with dangerous goods will increase tremendously, because if you replace LNG, diesel by LNG, then in volume you need almost twice the volume to be transported over the road to have the same energy density available on such a filling station. So yes, using river barges to transport LNG into the hinterland, so into along the River Rhine into Germany with intermediate storage facilities along this Rhine would help tremendously to make the logistics around LNG more efficient and to reduce also the risks of accidents. Okay. And this is something certainly we
have to look at.
We have to do. But again, it's chicken and egg. So it will happen if the market really takes off, and then this certainly will happen. Also, transporting LNG by rail is a possibility. There are now one of the largest German rail carrier on rail is now investing heavily in LNG tanks so that you can transport the LNG from Rotterdam to Germany. And Germany is planning also an LNG terminal in the north part of Germany, so to make it easier to bring the LNG on the places where you need it.
Okay.
So this is about the network. So it's Spain, France, Benelux, Germany now, Italy is expanding rapidly, which means another stumbling block removed to switch
international traffic.
To switch actually to support the main transport roads through Europe. Then when we started, also the fueling station technology was not mature. It was there were mobile stations which were doing the job, but you always needed manned stations to cope with unexpected problems with pressure and venting and things like that. Today we see that the stations which are being built now, they are more or less one standard in terms of saturation levels, pump nozzles, safety features on the station, and they can all use as unmanned stations. And in fact, it offers the same service and the same way of refueling a truck as the truck driver is used with a diesel station. There were also some local legislation asking for personal instruction from each driver, and that's how we started, because it was part of the permitting process, for instance in the Netherlands, but also in Belgium and also in Germany. And and we saw, as there was a different technical standards, that made life very complicated.
Yeah.
We see now there are some working groups being developed by NGVA Europe to standardize a filling instruction for LNG filling stations, and also to standardize further on connectors and pressures in the tanks, so that a truck which comes from Spain up to Denmark or whatever, the driver has a good recognition of the filling station which he is standing in front of, so that he knows which button works. And there is still some room for improvement, because there are still some nasty differences. But as it further expands now, we see that this standard is getting more and more unified.
Okay, good. Is there a lot of maybe it's a bit nasty question also, but is there a lot of boil off in these type of tanks? I mean, that if it stands still for a long time, is that an issue, or is that not?
Well, yes, of course that's an issue, because it's not allowed to have methane emissions when a station is in normal operation, and so you have to do something, and there are solutions for it. The easiest one is having a high throughput. So that the holding time in the tank is limited, so that you don't reach the pressure levels that safety valves will open. The second one is cooling with, for instance, liquid nitrogen, so that you can cool down the LNG. Or a third option is to cool with cooling equipment, but that means that you are using a lot of energy to do so. So if you then look well to wheel on your carbon dioxide reduction performance, it's negatively influenced by it. So my advice is, don't do that.
No.
So and then there is a fourth possibility. That's the one we started to use in the Netherlands, is that you can, if you arrive with a new tank trailer with cold LNG, you first absorb the overpressure in the tank.
Oh, okay.
So you let it recondensate in the cold LNG from the trailer before you fill the tank.
Okay.
So, and that's if you have short transport distances, that's the most efficient way of doing. But now in Germany, for instance, the stations we are building now, they will all be equipped with liquid nitrogen cooling. And depending on the throughput of the station, because it's a hired facility, so we can decide if the throughput is high and remains high, you just easily can take away the nitrogen cooling, and that saves you on operational cost.
Okay.
But management of the station, so the logistics around LNG filling stations, is that's the key factor to have an efficient operation without methane emissions, or an inefficient one and methane emissions.
Where your valves open up.
So LNG logistics are really the key to success.
Okay.
That's why when we started, we had our own logistics. As the business is getting more and more mature, now you can subcontract it to hauliers. But in the beginning, it was essential to have your own logistics. Well, then there is still the urgency to reduce the global emissions, CO2, and what we call the local emissions. We have seen the diesel scandal has again in Europe shown that the diesel has its limitations. Today, the latest versions of the diesel cars are as clean as a petrol car, but the image damage is done, and it will be very difficult to bring back again confidence in diesel. So the diesel is a little bit
slowly dying.
While on the other hand, for transport, it's the main engine which will remain for many years, because it has proven its efficiency and its longevity, etc.
And the actual CO2 emission is also significantly lower than with a petrol car. So
but the message I'm bringing here is that if instead of looking at some very long dots on the horizon. If you should switch today from diesel to natural gas in heavy transport, then you have immediately a 10 to 20% carbon dioxide reduction, and in the tailpipe you have an immediate 50-55 extra NOx reduction and up to 95% particle reduction, just without any other brand new technologies and infrastructures. So this would be already a big step forward. And I still don't understand why we are not moving forward faster than we are doing.
Perhaps we want to go to the zero right away.
Of course, but that route has still some stumbling blocks. I will come back on that later. Well, then this corona crisis, what have we seen so far? Well, just before the crisis, you could see that the car industry is really retooling heavily at the moment from petrol, diesel towards battery electric vehicle and hybrids, just to meet the very stringent CO2 emission levels which are allowed from next year in Europe. And I think this crisis, with a complete stop of production and a restart of production, will create a second thoughts about shall we accelerate now into this technology and skip a lot of other models and types of engines at this moment, because it saves cost. And we have seen that with this crisis, everybody's sitting at home. The whole the car movements reduced almost up to 30% from the old levels. That with working through this kind of communication as we are doing today, it might not be necessary to have this high level of car sales in Europe. So my impression is, and what I see on the big industry groups, that they will really now accelerate the retooling towards battery vehicles and hybrids, especially the hybrids for the heavier SUV models, and for the medium size and small cars. It's certainly if you look at the new models which are being announced, this is development which goes.
Maybe it's all even in demand. We talked about this before this webinar as well. That, for example, President Macron in France said, "Okay, Renault, yes, we can save you, and PSA as well, but then you have to go and be the winner.
You have to be the sustainable,
the lead on e-cars,
exactly,
things like that. So it's accelerating massively in that sense.
And we see in some countries, we see it in the Netherlands, and also in very dense populated areas, there is a call for zero emission trucks for logistics, supermarket distribution and things like that. And we see the first prototypes of battery electric trucks on the road. And it looks nice, but if you look at the real business case, the ranges of these trucks are still very limited. It's about 100 kilometers, and that's about it.
The small trucks, I think.
Well, up to 12 to 18 tons, so it's already possible. But then you need a very dense infrastructure for recharging these trucks to make it possible. For long haulage, for the real big logistic flows along European roads, battery electric trucks are no option. But politicians and also the public said, if battery electric cars are available, then battery electric trucks and buses also should be a possibility.
Or planes.
So we want to ban diesel trucks, and so just come with this. And so in order to create then a truck with an electric motor which has sufficient range, then the only solution today is install a fuel cell on it, and then you can increase the range of the truck. But then you need hydrogen. And then the next question is, where can I find refueling stations? So the same questions and the same developments we have seen with Tesla on his electric cars and with us on the LNG side, how can we crack the chicken and egg situation? Because these fuel cell trucks, they certainly can be developed. The technology is there. It's a matter of good engineering and combining the right components. Then this can happen. But the hydrogen refueling infrastructure, that's the big challenge, because green hydrogen is not available. It just simply doesn't exist. You have to make it. And you have to make it with electrolyzer with electricity and water. And the efficiency of such a process is very low. And a fueling station...
Blue hydrogen is also a possibility, but still you have to add technology and energy to make it.
And if you have blue hydrogen, how do you transport it? Because that we have seen with why did we start with LNG in trucks? Because compressed natural gas on a truck works, but then the range is simply insufficient to do a long distance transport. And I would put the idea on the table, if hydrogen, the ideal is, and I will show it later, is to produce the hydrogen on the spot where you need it. But that means enormous investments. It means enormous electric power, which you have to be available on that spot. But if you should look into what LNG has done, that you liquefy hydrogen and then transporting will be easier, and that makes you much more flexible to set up a refueling network, might be a good idea.
It's much more stringent. I mean, hydrogen compared to liquid natural gas is a completely different ballgame almost. You know, it may look like it's in a similar range, but it's not really, depending on materials and things like that. It's quite hard.
But we also see that there are now, I just read an article about new liquefaction technologies on hydrogen, which reduces the amount of energy needed for that tremendously. So, and then it comes much closer to LNG than we would expect at this moment.
Do you think these things can work together? Because whatever we feel about hydrogen, you know, it is probably going to be pushed in one form or another. But you were also mentioning, these LNG filling stations, now we see a little bit of momentum coming up. But for the hydrogen, it's the same challenge, actually. You have to have these stations before people go and invest in trucks.
Exactly.
Can they exist together, or is it a competition?
Well, one of the companies which is now planning to introduce a truck, I will show you later, is planning to roll out the refueling network along the same areas where now the LNG filling stations are being installed, because there is a link between these two. So I think that could be an opportunity.
It's not like money is being taken out of one solution, so there will not be an investment in the other. No. It's you think it can be similar simultaneously.
Then, so there is a demand for fuel cell electric trucks, but then hydrogen is a problem. To meet the Paris CO2 reduction targets, enormous investments are done in solar and wind electric power, and this will continue, will even be, I think, accelerated compared to the original plans. But then the question comes up, if, for instance, in the Netherlands we only have 6 to 8% of our electric power is sustainable. Germany is already close to 30-40%, and the Scandinavian countries even further. But assume that with all the efforts which we are putting now in place, like on the North Sea with big wind parks, we can reach 30, 40, perhaps 50% of sustainable electricity. Then the next question comes up, if we need green hydrogen for mobility, we need an enormous amount of electricity. But what will get the priority in the near future? Will that sustainable electricity be used for home heating, for industrial applications, or for this very inefficient green hydrogen mobility. So that's another question I would like to put on the table. I think that the priority will be more towards households, industry, passenger car mobility, and instead of investing in a very inefficient process to produce green hydrogen just for mobility.
And then reconverting it to electricity in the car.
Exactly, because it's very inefficient. If you have two cars, a fuel cell car and a battery car, driving 100 kilometers, that battery car uses about between 16 and 20 kilowatt hours for it. If you want to do the same with a green hydrogen car, you need 3 to 4 times that number of electricity.
Okay.
Because the whole chain of generating electricity, making hydrogen, making electricity is very inefficient. And if we had a surplus on green electric power, then it makes life easier. But as green electric power still is limited and still needed enormously, I doubt if we will start using that limited availability just to make green hydrogen for an application where good alternatives are in place.
Yeah, exactly. Because but I do feel that what they also mean by that, with the hydrogen case, is that capacity is one thing, but actually generation is another thing. So you have a lot of generation in certain times of day or weeks that you have a lot of left over. So then you can use it for hydrogen. But indeed, are you then not making yourself more vulnerable to that intermittency also for the hydrogen-driven trucks?
Yeah, and these trucks are driving long distances in a very tight schedule, and you cannot wait in a filling station until there is again wind and solar power. So you need it at the moment the truck is there. So and then you will use again fossil power to generate that, and then I will show you later what this means in carbon dioxide emissions compared to other fuels. So I think I made my point here that green hydrogen for mobility, I put a big question mark behind it.
Yeah. Okay. Clear.
An example, and to show you some figures about it.
It looks cool. That's at least.
Of course. Yeah. This is the background of this is that Case New Holland Industrial has taken an important share in the further rollout of the Nikola electric and fuel cell electric trucks in the US and also in Europe. The Nikola 1 and 2 are planned for the US. The Nikola 3 is the one which will be prepared for the European market. In Germany, in Ulm, the production facilities are being tooled now to start producing this truck by the end of next year.
Okay.
And this is the model as it will become available in Europe. And yes, it's the same as we said from Tesla. It looks attractive, and that's also very important.
Maybe not so. I don't know about trucks. It could be that truck owners are not so.
Oh yes.
Yeah, they're sensitive too.
There are also emotions around truck styling and.
Do they like the Tesla truck as well? The one that they are planning?
Well, in Europe, we look at it, but the concept is not suitable for the European. If you have the weights and the dimension regulations in Europe, this truck is very difficult to use efficiently. Yeah. But yes, from a styling point of view, it's really efficient.
I didn't know that.
Some characteristics of this truck. It's the battery electric truck will have a dual motor of 480 kilowatts. Typical American, a maximum speed of, say, 70 miles, so 121 kilometers an hour, which will not be the case in Europe. No. But a range of 400 kilometers, which for an electric truck is already a big...
It's not so bad. It's pretty good.
And the first trucks are planned to be available, that was announced before the whole Corona crisis started, 2021. So if that will be delayed now, I don't know. But still, the preparations are still ongoing.
Maybe it's even accelerated.
Could even be accelerated. Yeah. Then the
fuel cell electric truck, they have, with the same motor, they are adding a 300 kilowatt fuel cell with 700 bar tanks containing 80 kilograms of hydrogen, which already is a challenge because you need an enormous volume to store 80 kilos of hydrogen.
Yeah.
But then the range will be 800 kilometers, which for a truck is already a big step forward.
Yeah.
And the planning of this truck is 2023.
So it's a little later than the first electric. Yeah. So they start off with
electric. Battery electric and then fuel cell.
And that battery electric one is similar in load as a normal 40-ton or something truck, right?
A tractor unit with the same. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And then the battery, sorry, I have a technical question.
Yeah.
The battery is in the tractor unit.
It has to be in the tractor unit.
Okay. Oh, interesting.
So that's a real challenge.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Then they also specified the refueling infrastructure needed for these trucks. The capacity is about 8,000 kilograms of green hydrogen a day. So if you take a truck using 80 kilos for 800 kilometers, this means that you can refuel about 100 trucks a day, which is already quite something.
Yeah.
But you need a site area of 3 to 4 hectare for the electric, the solar cells. And even if you look at the electric power needed, 17.8 megawatts, that are at this moment 4 large wind turbines. Yeah. Just to give you an idea about the energy.
Yeah, because this is based on that you produce the energy on location.
The idea behind Nikola is that you produce the hydrogen with green electricity on the spot where you need it.
Yeah.
So no transport movements from a factory towards a filling station.
Okay.
So, it's in fact a little bit what there is a hydrogen station in the Netherlands, for instance, at the automotive campus in Helmond. There is such a station, a small one, where you have water available and you have electricity, and they make on the spot with electrolyzer. They make hydrogen. Compressor is compressing it, and then you can refuel cars and buses over there. And this is the same idea, but then made with solar and wind power as main energy source, and a backup from the mains.
Okay. Yeah.
You need some water for it, about 75,000 liters.
That's a lot.
And the refueling of a truck takes about 15 minutes, which in fact is the current technology of the hydrogen filling stations from 700. So you have a 900 bar storage, and then you can fill the 700 bar tanks on your truck or your car or your bus. This is the artist's impression how that station would look like. Very close a little. If you remember the LNG station, I've shown you some slides earlier. Then you see some resemblance.
Yeah.
But then in the roof there are solar cells installed, and the trucks. This is the American Tesla. Nikola, the Nikola 1 or 2. So the typical American styled trucks.
Yeah. Is it the idea also within Europe, perhaps, to go back to the filling stations? Is that who is making these filling stations? Is it indeed the idea that Nikola does this, or is it then only a suggestion to the policymakers?
This is exactly how Tesla started. They installed their own superchargers to make it possible to drive in a country or through Europe with the cars. The same idea is behind the Nikola concept, but if then Nikola will do it themselves or they will outsource, because this technology is something quite different than constructing a truck. So fueling station technology is different. But I would expect, I've seen various concepts of this technology, also a lot of German technology. Already we have seen it in the north of Germany. There is a plant where they make hydrogen, and where they make a fuel station out of it. So the companies are available, the technology is there, but the concept here is to concentrate it into a very efficient site with a very high performance, because producing 8,000 kilos of hydrogen, that's a day,
that's a lot.
Is a lot.
Yeah. But then they do it themselves. Is it also now the normal way of doing, if you build a refueling station from LNG, do you get, is it that a company does it, or is it the state?
Yeah, well, I'm still working as a consultant to the previous company I worked for. And when we started, we were just buying components, and we defined the concept. And then we were looking for a civil contractor and an installation company to make it. But as the market is getting more mature, we see now that you can buy turnkey stations from some companies in Europe. And so we are now the new stations which are being planned and installed now in the near future. They will all be pre-assembled in a factory and installed by a specialist company. So our involvement
is less in that.
Is less and less, and we will mainly focus on on selling the molecules and making, that's the business case, is selling the molecules through these filling stations.
But is it the states that give you these, like, I want a station here? Is it the local government, or is it another government, or is it a company like Nicolai that tells you to, like, I want a station right here?
It also depends. In fact, you can, if you look back today at the LNG filling stations, they were showing more or less an organic growth. So we had the first customer in the Netherlands, which was a big supermarket chain, and they had its distribution center on various spots in the Netherlands, and it was logic to build the first stations very close to this distribution centers. As international transport is now moving more and more towards LNG. Now you can see that the main transport routes with the big diesel filling stations are becoming the more logical spots to install also an LNG.
Just like the Fastnet terminals.
Exactly. So in the beginning it was where the customers were. Now you can see the shift already to where is the demand, where are the main transport routes, so where can we expect the best opportunity to sell LNG. For instance, in Germany, that will be most likely this big Autohofs, they call it. So where you have diesel, and I was last week again on such an Autohof. They have hydrogen, they have compressed natural gas, they have petrol,
LPG,
diesel, LPG. They have everything on one spot, and I would expect that kind of locations would also be the logic locations for this. But if I read then 3 to 4 hectare,
that's a lot
area, then this will be really a challenge to build them in Europe.
Maybe
and then I'm coming back. That's why I'm saying then it would perhaps be more logical to try to go the liquid hydrogen route and set it up in the same way as we have done with LNG.
That sounds maybe better.
This is nice in the middle of a desert where you have plenty of room. But in the dense populated areas in Europe, I think it will be a real challenge to find these locations.
Maybe it's also not a logical choice in the sense that the transport routes may not all go to lightly populated areas. You know, they start off in a highly dense population and they end in a dense population, but in between. In Europe, is also not a lot of space.
Exactly. So, as I said, I was traveling from here to the south of Germany. If you look along the motorways, it's all built with factories and so the available space is limited. The roadmap they announced. They said we will follow the LNG infrastructure, which is
interesting.
And by 2030, which is say 10 years from now, they are planning to have 70 of these refueling stations, and 700 in the US. So, but let's focus on Europe, and then they will focus in the first phase on the main European transport corridors like the Netherlands, Germany. Denmark, France, Italy, and the second phase Scandinavia, UK, Spain, Hungary, and then the third phase Eastern Europe.
Okay.
This was the planning. And again, with the corona crisis, this might be accelerated. But you could also say that, for instance, countries like Scandinavia get a certain priority because they were much less hit by the crisis. So perhaps some changes can be done. But this was the idea of rolling it out, which makes sense.
Do you expect that this will be subsidized to a certain extent? That this kind of hydrogen infrastructure, I think it probably will be, but
certainly.
Yeah.
That's how we started with LNG and bio-LNG. There was also some subsidies available, European and also national ones. And if I see the green plans the European Commission announced, the rollout of such a station will certainly be heavily promoted.
Yeah.
But then I also think that it's very important that there will be defined a kind of standard, because if Mr. Nicola sets up this fueling network and Daimler and Volvo announced that they also will come with some fuel cell electric trucks. Then it's very important to have the same standards in terms of connectors and pressures and things like that, because else it will be very inefficient to have different filling station networks working alongside each other. So I don't think that will happen.
No, at least that is not the idea.
But it means that standardization and is very important also in this technology.
Yeah. So basically what you're saying also is Europe should take somewhat the lead in that, at least in that part.
Yeah.
Like standardization.
We learned that from LNG. When we started with LNG, there were 2 different saturation levels needed for the LNG. So the Iveco and Scania, they had a certain saturation level from about 7 to 8 bars. And Mercedes at that time had an LNG truck requiring 14 to 18 bars, which was a nightmare for the fueling station operators. And today we again have 2 standards. Volvo requires cold LNG, what they say, it's about 3 bars saturated. And Scania, Iveco, 7 to 8 bars. So we still have 2 standards. But the good news is you can, with one saturation level, the highest one, you can fill both all the trucks.
You can switch it or something.
But you can't. But the cold one you cannot use in the Ivecos and the Scanias.
Okay.
So there is still some room for further standardization. And the same we will see with this new technology. That it's very important to try from day one to standardize, because that will tremendously help to roll out this technology.
Okay, that sounds very logical to me.
Well, why did I put this in my presentation? Because this is a picture which is already some years old, but it's still a very relevant picture. It shows from the different fuels available, it's in German, Treibhausgas, so it shows the greenhouse gas emissions, well to wheel, in grams carbon dioxide per kilometer. They took petrol as a standard, and then you can see that, and they took it from a standard mid-size car, but the idea, what I wanted to show to here is that these are technical facts. Politicians, they make us to believe that we have to go, for instance, for hydrogen, but these same politicians are asking also for a very stringent reduction of carbon dioxide. Well, and if you look at this picture and you look at the performance, the CO2 performance of diesel, autogas is LPG, but forget that. That's no longer an
no longer an option.
No longer an option. But then you see natural gas gives you a 24% reduction compared to petrol, a little bit less compared to diesel. If you should start to blend natural gas with biogas, then even reduction levels up to 40% can be achieved. And if you should use 100% pure biomethane, then even 97% reduction is achievable, which is one of the best potentials from all the fuels at this moment. Ethanol is another good alternative, but less used, only as a blend with petrol here in Europe. Biodiesel is a difficult one for engines and emission control systems. So, but then the famous hydrogen. If we should use electricity to make hydrogen today, then you can see that your carbon dioxide emissions will be higher than whatever alternative in the market. So my message is, if you look at this picture, and we have to meet the Paris Agreement requirements, don't start with hydrogen made from classic electricity, because then we are really moving backwards instead of forward.
Yeah, okay, you could say that, of course, I agree, but if you look at the figures, but I think that what people also trying to achieve is to make a market. So the market you can only make, so you have to start somewhere, same with LNG, so that you can make hydrogen from the power mix that we have now, and indeed that is not very efficient.
Of course, if you then, and that's the idea, and if we go to 30, 40, 50, 60% sustainable electricity, then this picture will move from this 174 slowly to the 8, and then hydrogen is one of the best. Yeah. But what is not behind this picture is the amount of electricity you need then.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is far more than we are using today. And already today, the power stations have their limits, and the distribution network. So these are the other.
Yeah, maybe another one is also, you mentioned here biomethane, and indeed that's a possibility. But we also seen, because biomethane is not new, it's also there for 30 years almost, but it's not really gaining that much ground. And this particular reason is that this biomass is quite difficult to get. So there's a limit there in how much you can actually generate. But maybe you can generate enough.
That's the same what I said about electricity. So distribution network, the biomass collection and logistics are very difficult to organize in an efficient way to make it available. And there are examples where on big industrial sites where, for instance, paper mills, where you have a large concentration of biomass
sugar
products
mills,
and sugar mills. There you can set up quite an efficient biogas production site. But if it's very distributed over the country, it's very difficult to achieve that.
Yeah, but it's interesting to see that from the actual figure standpoint, you can see that also with just going to natural gas. I think André Pusicek was one of our lecturers also 2 weeks ago, said the same thing, or not last week actually. Like, okay, it's a very easy step. There's an easy step to go from whatever you're using right now to go to first to natural gas, LNG, and then you already save 25%. Right now, so you don't have to go and do all kinds of other things. And then we can wait, because there's some reactions on your statement about hydrogen also from the public.
Of course, I can imagine. I would be surprised if there were no reactions on it.
Perhaps then we also have the time to go and see what is the best alternatives. Are these biomass-related biomethane? Can we increase that flow? Or can we go indeed to hydrogen? But then hydrogen in the industry, or hydrogen in a different way, perhaps. So I think that's a very nice message as well.
Another remark I would like to make, switching today in the passenger car side from petrol, diesel to electric cars is a very good alternative, even with the current EU electricity mix.
Yeah, I know that there was a big study also in the European-wide, that even in Poland, where there's a lot of coal-fired power,
even there
it's already low.
Because the efficiency in the car itself is very high, which compensates for some other effects. So yes, from an technology point of view, the electric car is the most efficient way of
going first steps, and then for heavy transport, you say go to LNG first.
We would say go for LNG first, with blends of bio-LNG where possible. Then it gives you more possibilities, and that could be a very interesting transition scenario towards electric propelled trucks with a fuel cell, with with hydrogen.
For later.
But then you have to really to think about how this hydrogen distribution would be set up. Because, as I said, if you have to build the stations as Nicola is seeing here, then it will be a difficult one, which looks nice, and in the ideal world it would fit. But perhaps we should look into some alternative ways of storing and transporting hydrogen in the way as we are using LNG.
Yeah. Maybe one question I had, and it's a bit outside of Europe, it is about India actually, but maybe more general, we can say developing countries. Is it a good idea that because the infrastructure is usually not there, so they have to make choices also for the heavy transport. Do you think it's a good idea to go to LNG first, or should they perhaps wait until battery electric is so efficient that they can just go and do that?
For passenger cars, I would say go for battery electric. For heavy trucks, it highly depends on the availability of LNG. And lessons we have learned in the US is the following. In the US, they started to produce a lot of gas and oil with the fracking technology. And there were big plans to install more than 300-400 LNG filling stations all over the country, and UPS should start to drive with LNG trucks, etc., etc. But they had to crawl back from that scenario to CNG because they could not handle LNG in the logistics and in their infrastructure. And I think that's the lesson for countries like India and also China, that
be careful.
Be careful.
Yeah, because your infrastructure has to handle it, or it requires a lot of money to do that.
Yeah. Okay. So now they are switching back in the UK from LNG to CNG, and it's possible because the dimensions allowed on trucks, on tractor units, are more different than here. So you have sufficient space on a tractor unit to install CNG tanks to get a sufficient range on the road. But in Europe, with the very compact dimensions, LNG is the only solution.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah, we're running out of time.
Okay.
I would like to thank you very much, and I think it's great that indeed to see also that what we have with other speakers as well is that your message also like start right now. Make sure you have the most smart options that can already decarbonize your whatever you want to decarbonize immediately. I think that's a good one. So we have some time to develop new solutions. So thank you for that. Just would like to mention, next week we have an LNG course also planned online. So there are still a few places left. It's almost sold out. But if you're interested, just have a look at our website. We also in October have a small-scale LNG course with Peter as well. So we will discuss more about those aspects that he briefly touched on right now. And for the rest, last thing is that there's a survey also on the website, and that is related to online learning and virtual learning. If you feel interested, please fill it in. It gives us information about how to continue with these online activities. Thank you very much again. Thank you all for joining, and have a good day.